If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what is the most unexplained thing that has ever happened to you? I was 13, camping with my family on the border of Alaska and Canada. I think it was June, just about dusk, and if you know anything about Alaska you'll know that was quite late. We'd been listening to what sounded like bear noises, moans, grunts and caterwauls like you'd hear from baby bears coming from the woods all evening. This isn't a terribly abnormal thing in Alaska but still sent a shiver down our backs. My younger sisters and my mother and I were setting up the tent and all of a sudden a bunch of birds freak out and fly out of the forest about 150 yards away. We all turn that way to look at the sound, and just as we do, something crosses a clearing from where the birds flew. In the clearing there stood one tree with branches starting higher up, and as the thing, we thought it was a human, walked upright on two legs, arms swinging, etc., crossed, its head just came up to the lowest branch. We automatically assumed it was my 6'2" brother going into the woods to pee. It was one of those moments you see in a movie. I said, "That must be Blake," and not 2 seconds later, our brother shows up behind us, asking why we look so startled. So then we rationalized it by saying it must have been someone else going into the woods. My brother went over to the clearing to check it out, and as we stood and watched, we realized how huge the thing was. Blake was about half its bulk and came about 2 feet short of the lowest branch that the thing's head brushed. He came back shaky and clearly startled. My brother the skeptic said he heard something very heavy running very fast through the woods. When I was a kid, I suffered from asthma bad. I mean almost died several times bad. Had to go to the hospital almost weekly bad. It was on one such fateful night, I saw something. I have never claimed it to be 100% true, as I was still lightheaded from the asthma attack earlier. But I know it wasn't a dream. I remember it vividly because my father's parents were already divorced and hated each other, so him being there meant it was bad, driving us home. I looked out of the driver's side rear seat and looked down. There I saw a dog/human thing. It was the size of an average coyote, with hind legs like one, but its front legs were that of a human's, but with animal paws. It was covered in silverish gray hair, and its skin way dark and rough looking. As I sat up more to get a better look, it turns to look at me. Its eyes were pale white and empty looking. This thing was fast. It was keeping up with the car, after all. As we continued down the road, I never felt scared or anything. Just at peace. Like it wasn't going to hurt me, just protect me. Anyway, we turned onto our road and it stopped. I looked out the back windshield, and it just sat there. And disappeared. From that day on, my asthma got less and less severe. I asked my father, who is half Native American, and he told me it might have been a spirit that was watching out for me. I'm not religious anymore, but I'll be damned if I don't have a healthy level of respect for Native American customs/spirits nowadays. Not to me, but to my mom. When I was younger, about 7, my mother and stepfather went to bingo and left me with the neighbors. Anyways, when they got back from their night out, they come rushing in, close the door, and are out of breath and kind of freaking out. I'm playing with their kids and I am overhearing my mom, stepfather, neighbor and her husband, and they are talking in the kitchen, and my mom is explaining in Spanish. It stopped in the road and the cars all stopped and it spread its wings and then flew away. It was huge. Some guy tried to run it over. So I asked my mom about it and she said it's nothing. The next morning, we go to eat breakfast at a restaurant and she overhears some people at another table talking, and one of the ladies says it just landed and it was big, almost as big as a car, and then it flew away. And my mom asks them, "Did you see that bird last night too?" And they start talking about this huge bird that landed on the road, flapped its wings, turned and then flew off. Now fast forward when I am in college and we are talking about strange things, and I had shared this experience and we were talking and goofing around, maybe it was a pterodactyl, and one guy, stranger from another table, looks at us and says in a calm, serious voice, "Your mom saw a thunderbird." I looked it up and it freaked me out. I always thought my mom made up that story to keep kids in line, but then the restaurant thing laid validity, and then the college guy was serious about it. When I was 14, my dad and I were home alone as my mom and brothers went to visit the grandparents. One morning I woke up and got ready to go round a friend's house. Dad said he wasn't feeling too great and that he was going to have a lie down. Didn't think anything of it and went to my friend's house. On the way there I had this feeling of dread and fear that I couldn't quite pin down, so I phoned my mom and told her that Dad and I were all right, but he felt ill. Nothing unusual at all. Dad was ill quite a lot with headaches and whatnot. When I actually got to my friend's house, I was there no longer than 5 minutes when the feeling of dread got overwhelming. I felt like the world was closing in on me and that I was about to die. Fear welled up in me and it was impossible to ignore it. I left and walked home, not ran. I don't know why, the whole way back knowing, not thinking, I knew it as if it had already happened, that I was going to find something at home that I didn't want to. I've also just realized typing this that I didn't phone my dad as I walked home. I think I wanted to stave off what I was going to discover as long as possible. I got to the corner near to my house and freeze. A big hedge separates my house from the path and I didn't want to go around, because I knew what was on the other side. I could see it in my mind. A few minutes go past and I eventually manage the few steps around the hedge and my heart drops. An ambulance is sitting on my drive. The fear and dread disappeared instantly and everything just seemed to become calm. I walked past the ambulance, still don't understand why I didn't look in it first, and into the house. The living room is a mess, my dad's computer chair is on its side and everything on his desk is scattered onto the floor. I calmly walk through each room in the house, but no one's in any of them, so back out to the ambulance. I knock on the doors and the wait seems like an eternity. I didn't want them to open. Once they're opened, it's over. But they do and there's my dad. Alive. Sitting up on the bed grinning with the paramedics. I can remember saying that's my father and then getting into the ambulance. I was angry, confused and relieved all at the same time. For the last half an hour my mind had convinced me that I was going to find something life-changing at home, but here he was perfectly, at the time, alright. When I'd left for my friend's house my dad had went on to his computer and suddenly thought that he was having a heart attack. He phoned 999 and tried to describe what was happening, but he passed out and the next thing he remembers is the paramedics scooping him off the floor and taking him into the ambulance. Turns out his aorta was slowly but surely tearing away from his heart and he was rushed into surgery. They chucked an artificial valve in him and 10 years later he's fit as a fiddle. I'll never be able to explain what I felt and why I'd drawn back home. I don't believe in anything supernatural or spiritual, so coincidence I guess. A bloody weird coincidence. I had a girlfriend once who, whilst discussing this exact topic, admitted in a very embarrassed tone that she thought her previous house was haunted. All the usual stuff, closed latch doors opening on their own, footsteps and no one there. Until one day she woke up to get a drink at night and saw an apparition of man in his late 40s, well dressed, standing at the top of the stairs. She blinked a few times to make sure she wasn't imagining shadows in the dark, but he was there, looking down the stairs. He turned and walked away. She grabbed a bat and ran upstairs afterwards, but he was gone. Creepy enough, right? But easy enough to disregard and nod and smile politely with the disclaimer that the universe is full of unexplained shit and anything's possible, etc., etc. A year later we're at this party and meet a random guy who it turns out lived in the same suburb as that. Turned out to be the same street. Turned out to be the same house. Guy kind of looks around awkwardly and says, I don't want to sound weird or anything but, did you see the ghost at the top of the stairs? We had never met this guy and had no common friends, and I was the only person she'd ever told about it. Freaked me the fuck out. My story is from my first tour in Iraq. We were stationed not far from Baghdad at the time. Our sector had some heavy activity a couple months earlier, and as a result there was a 2,200 closing of checkpoints set at most crossroads in the area. No in, no out. This was followed at 2,400 by a strict off-street curfew. On this night we were lucky enough to have patrol duty instead of manning one of those points. At about 2,230 we have pulled to the side of the road to mount over watch for a while, when a minivan slowly pulls up. An honest-to-God Astro van-style minivan. Iraq has vans. Vans of many makes and types. However, Iraq does not have soccer mom mobiles. Weird but not too weird. Still cautious, could be anything. Probably just a local trapped on the wrong side of the CP trying to beg through. However, next comes the driver. I move forward to try and puzzle out what he wants. The driver asks in flawless American accented English, hey, are the roads closed ahead? I had expected broken English begging me to help him through the very closed checkpoint ahead. The best I could stammer was something like yeah as eloquently as possible. His response, again in a perfect American accent, well, dang. Oh well. You have a good night now, catch you later buddy. I'm paraphrasing him but I distinctly remember him calling me buddy as he drove off. I remember because as I wondered about his car and the conversation I saw his license plate. It was from Florida. To this day I don't know who that stranger was but I wonder if he wasn't just some guy who got really lost and refused to ask for directions. Good luck to you traveler, I hope you finally found your way home. I went to go help my uncle clean out his cousin's house after one of them passed away. They were hoarders so they kept everything under the sun, including bags of trash. Well, after a few hours and barely making a dent I went upstairs to go take a leak. After I was done I washed my hands and go to use the towel which hung under a wall-length mirror. I look in the mirror and I see a guy, maybe 40s behind me. Apron on, blood on it, handlebar mustache, epic, hair parted down the middle. I mean to a T, I remember him today. I turned, he's gone. I haul ass downstairs, tell my mom, she laughs it off like I'm some sort of ghost whisperer. We go into the basement to start there. Full on butcher station and aprons hanging from apparently the guy who built the place in the 1900s. So I work at a sandwich shop. Anyway, I was getting ready to close at 10 p.m. and I'm pretty meticulous about closing on time because I'm usually ready to go home by then. Anyway, it's 9:55 p.m. and the bell rings, letting me know someone came in. I grumble a little because I'm tired and head to the front. This little boy, probably 7 or 8, is standing in front of the counter. He's wearing this old-fashioned, tweed jacket and a red baseball cap. I say, hello, what can I do for you tonight? Like I usually do. He just stares at me like I grew a second head. I stare back, confused. I have to use the restroom, he says and runs back to where the restrooms are. I hear the door squeal open and slam shut. At this point I'm a little aggravated because I'm getting ready to close and I don't want to have to wait on this little brat whose parents couldn't even be bothered to come in with him. So I start to close. I turn off the open sign and head to the back to do some quick dishes, thinking I'll just lock the door behind the little boy when he leaves. I finish the dishes and start to put the food in the refrigerator. I'm starting to get pissed. All I have to do is put the food away, count the bread, and count the drawer. I finish all of this and still no little boy. I put on my coat and get ready to leave, gathering receipts and such. I go to knock on the door of the boys' restroom. Hey, I'm closing, you need to leave. Nothing. Hey, kid, come on. Still nothing. If you don't at least answer me, I'm going to open the door. The lock was broken, so I knew I would be able to open it. I stood there, worrying that maybe something happened to him. Kid? I jiggle the handle until it opens. I kind of cover my eyes, because I didn't really want to see a little boy on the toilet. I expected him to scream or at the very least say something. When all there was silence, I looked into the restroom the size of a small closet. There was no one. No sign of anything. The lid was still lifted from when I had cleaned it earlier. No trash in the bin. What? I checked the girls' restroom and the entire lobby, nothing. Nowhere in the entire shop. And there is absolutely no way that he left. It's impossible that he left because I've worked there long enough that the doorbell is a Pavlovian response. And you can hear it clearly everywhere in the store. I went into work a little early the next morning and get my check. My close friend was there and she and I talked for a little about her boyfriend and gossip that she had and whatever. Then she says, dude, there was the creepiest little kid standing outside the front door this morning when I came in. We come in and leave from the back door, really? Yeah, he was just standing there staring in the window. But when I went to open the door, he ran off. What did he look like? I asked, trying to keep from freaking out. Boy, gray coat and red hat. Neither I nor anyone has seen or heard about him since. What the fuck? I used to listen to Sigur Rós every night while falling asleep. I was always into the paranormal and I still am. I've always had suspicions that there was something in my parents' house. Well, one night I was laying in bed just about to go to sleep. All of a sudden I felt something walk into my room. It's kind of hard to explain, I just felt a presence in the room. I opened my eye, and of course I saw nothing out of the ordinary. I then thought to myself, I should try to talk out loud, I've seen this on stupid paranormal shows and stuff. So I whispered something along the lines of, if there is someone in my room, give me a sign. All of a sudden my CD stopped playing and it was just static. It sounded like a crappy AM radio station. My CD player had a built-in radio, so I'm not sure if that got switched on or what. At this point in time I was petrified. All I could think is, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. Well, the static continues to play for 5 to 10 seconds. I then say out loud stop with a little firmness behind it, but still a whisper. Right as I said stop, the static stopped and my CD continued playing without a problem. I used that radio/CD player for 4 years before that and I still use it to this day, and nothing like that has ever happened to me before or anything like that after. It still sends shivers down my spine thinking about that. I was in college on a road trip with my 2 best friends. We stopped at a fast food place to eat lunch. After I place my order, I'm standing back waiting for them to call my number and I get this really weird feeling. Like, I'm not safe. And it's coming from the worker across the counter. I'm just absolutely petrified by this dude. Paralyzed. Then, all of a sudden as I'm looking at him, he gets this crazy black aura all around him. The best way I can describe it is that he had a cloud of black smoke all around him. Time stops, and I look over at my two best friends. They're paralyzed as well. I said to them, "Something is wrong here. There is something wrong with this man. Something is fooked up." They just shake their head yes. We talked about it in the car, got the food to go at that point, and agreed that we all saw the same thing, and had the fearful feeling before it happened. We've never spoken about it again. Clinton Road, New Jersey is home to some strange history, grim myths, and straight-up ghost stories, which makes it an ideal destination for bored teens who just got their licenses. One night shortly after my friend passed his driving test, he picked me up in his dad's car, which had those obnoxious blue headlights that blinded me as he pulled up my driveway. We pick up some more people, drive around aimlessly, decide to go to Clinton Road and throw a coin over the bridge to see if the ghost kid throws it back, one of the many legends associated with the place. As we're driving along the road towards the bridge, a car with its left headlight out passes us coming the other way, and one of the girls shouts "Padiddle," which made everyone laugh because most people stop saying this around age 9. A few minutes later, another car with its left headlight out passes, and my friend the driver screams "Padiddle," kind of mocking the girl. 3 more cars without a left light pass us, which we're on alert for now so we could each be the first to say "Padiddle." By the last one, which was a cop, we were all screaming "Padiddle" at the top of our lungs, not really noticing how odd it was that 5 of the 8 or so cars that passed us had a light out. We pull over at the bridge, do the coin thing, nothing happens, and we get ready to go back. Frustrated that I had never been remotely scared or excited, it was probably my 3rd or 4th time there, while the people I was with always were, I decided to really try to scare myself. So I told my friend to leave me there and drive down the road until I couldn't see his headlights, and then turn around and come back just so I could be alone in complete darkness in the middle of the woods and let my imagination run wild with the stories of ghost Corvettes, KKK meetings, Wiccans, mafia graveyards, ghost forest rangers, and all the other stories I'd heard. After finally convincing everyone to go through with it, they get in the car and turn it on. I run straight to the door and start pounding on it for them to let me in. Confused about how rapidly I'd changed my mind after arguing with them for so long, they asked why I was suddenly so scared. "Because I know for a fact you had 2 working headlights when we got here," I said, "and now the left one is out." Mission accomplished, I guess. This was back in 2006 when I worked at a pretzel store that rhymes with candy cans in the local mall. This is during the dead afternoon days of the summer. Usually there would just be one person. At this time, I am that one person. The day was going by pretty slowly, and with no windows, time would often stand still. Cameras made it hard for us to text people and slack off. Regardless, at some unknown time, a family of 3, mother, daughter, and young son, stopped some distance from the counter and stare at me and the pretzels. I would not have thought it to be odd except for how they were dressed. They looked like they came straight out of the 1950s. The son was much younger and was in 1950s style clothing as well. I'm thinking how weird this could possibly be, but then realized that right upstairs there was a professional photography place, so they were probably dressed up for some old-timey photos. It was not until the little boy came up to the counter and asked for a pretzel. I told him the price, $2.66, and he handed me a $1 bill. I motioned to the mother that the pretzel cost $2.66 and he was $1.66 short. She looked at me like I told her the pretzel cost $10. I mean, I understand that $2.66 was high for a pretzel, but she looked at me as if I wanted her to fork over her life savings. The little boy, not talking, hands me the dollar. I take a hard stare at it and realize it's a silver certificate, Series 1957. And this dollar bill did not look like it was almost half a century old. It had normal wear and tear like a Series 2003 bill had the time. It wasn't crisp, but it was still very much usable, and a bank would probably use it for further transactions. At this point I realized that nobody else really crossed their paths the entire time, and the entertainment/music store next door was pretty dead, even for a midsummer afternoon, while pedestrian traffic just seemed to be non-existent. I hand the dollar back to the young boy, and he walks away with his mother and sister. About 10 seconds later, pedestrian traffic walked through the area of the store. I was hiking around a local lake last year. Now, this particular lake is known for its coyote population, and it is 100% legal to hunt them on public land. I had taken my rifle out to do some hunting, but decided to give it up after an hour and just take some nature-type photos. I took my rifle back to the car and ventured out with just my camera and my marine surplus cover strapped to my belt. I had just taken some sweet pics of a red-tailed hawk when I began to hear the bushes rustling. I turned around to watch a couple of mangy coyotes hop out of the bushes. Me, being a quick thinker, snapped a couple pics of the coyote, then dropped my camera. I held eye contact with them as I drew my cobber in a defensive backhand grip. I knew I was probably going to die, but I wanted to show defiance in the face of death. I started whispering something about taking them with me when a rock came flying out of the stream behind me and caught one coyote right on the nose. I didn't turn around until they bolted, but I definitely heard no sounds of retreating from behind me. When the coyotes had gone, I turned around. The water was being displaced in a perfect circle in the middle of the stream. I could feel a slight charge in the air. I felt that I needed to say something, so I simply stated, "Well played, thanks," accompanied by a nod. I sensed some new feeling in the air, and felt that the being was nodding. Suddenly I was coming to on my back next to my car after dark. I checked my camera, which was laying next to me, and there were no pictures on it at all from that afternoon. I always try to convince myself that this was just my imagination going wild in a time of crisis. When my nephew was about 4 years old, we were at a picnic for a family reunion type thing at my uncle's house. In their backyard they had this totally bitching tree house that had a slide that went over a small creek. The tree house was about 30 feet off the ground. It was the middle of summer and the water had dried up in the creek, leaving only exposed rocks, I guess more like small boulders. They were about 3 feet in diameter, pretty solid. My nephew and the other kids were playing in the tree house, all taking turns going down the slide, and no one was really paying attention. How it happened is still not truly known, but we do know that somehow my nephew fell off the slide at its highest point and fell headfirst into the dried up creek bed. The sound was the first thing everyone noticed. It sounded like a gunshot, this extremely loud cracking. Everyone at the picnic was silent at this point. I vividly remember running over to the creek to see what happened, and every time I think about this day I get the same image in my head. I remember seeing him, laying on the flat rock, blood everywhere, and he's not moving. It's a really graphic image I get. Basically his head is caved in. This thought is always followed by something I can only describe as static, if that makes sense. I don't remember what really happened, but my next memory is of my nephew laying on a bench, no blood, completely awake but crying really loudly. An ambulance came and took him to the hospital, and he only ended up with a concussion and some scratches and bruises. It still sticks with me though. I know what I saw and I can't explain why I saw it. It feels like a memory, but it's not. I've never been a religious person, and I'm still not into organized religion, but I stopped being an atheist after that day. During the summers of high school and college I worked at a large Boy Scout camp in Southwest Virginia. The property is 17,000 acres of dense wilderness with 2 base camps and several backcountry outposts. Over the years there have been plenty of strange occurrences. I'll do my best to recount a few of them. One year after the summer session had ended, a few of us stayed in camp to hang out and help with some final winterizing before heading back to school. One of our tasks was to clean up the empty staff cabins and shower house. To give you an idea of the layout of staff camp, it was basically a parking lot with 2 large cabins for the senior staff on the west side, a shower house, with pseudo-outdoor stalls like you'd find at a state park, on the south side, and several smaller cabins for the junior staff on the east side. Since all of us remaining were in a senior cabin, we went through and swept out all the junior cabins and made sure the porch lights were off, and did the same with the shower stalls. That night, while chilling on our porch, we looked across the parking lot and 3 porch lights were on in the junior staff cabins. No one else had been in camp but the 4 of us, and none of us had any reason to go back and turn on the lights. The next night we noticed a light on in the shower house, which had been fully cleaned and each stall padlocked. We were using the nice bathroom/showers in the admin building at this point. Upon investigation we discovered that the stall with the light on was still locked from the outside. When we unlocked it to turn the light off, there was a shit in the toilet. Another summer, again after all the campers were gone, a similar small group of us was down on the lake in canoes fishing and screwing around. It was about dusk and I noticed a light on the side of the hill behind the lake. It was like a normal incandescent bulb, but it was shining through the trees in an area far from any camp buildings. I pointed it out to the others and we kind of stared at it for a few minutes until another one appeared. It didn't appear abruptly, but seemed to slowly brighten out of nothing, like with a dimmer switch. After a few more minutes another one appeared in the same way. At this point 2 of the guys paddled to shore and jumped in the truck to go check it out, though where the lights were coming from was pretty dense woods on a steep hill with no access by road or trail. As soon as we heard the truck get up to the top of the hill the lights faded out. They walked down through where we had seen them but didn't find anything that could have been a light source. One of the wilderness camps about a 2-mile hike from base camp is used once a week for the first-year capers for their overnighter. This camp is at the edge of the property with a road running by it and a creek on the opposite side. One of my friends who was director of the first-year program for several years has on multiple occasions heard the sound of scouts playing in the creek across the road, only to find no one there when he goes to yell at them to go back to the campsite. Another of our outposts is a frontier living program where the campers live like 1840s era pioneers. The staff even wear period attire. On occasion they have seen a man walking through the camp early in the morning dressed like a Union soldier from the Civil War. Even some adult leaders have reported seeing him, with no prior knowledge of his sightings. At the same frontier living outpost, the camp director's cabin is about 40 yards from one of the campsites. Teenage boys tend to be loud and keep late hours, so the camp director is sometimes kept awake by their rowdiness. Once they were getting pretty out of hand and it was almost 1 a.m. Out of exasperation the camp director just yelled "Shut up!" into the darkness without even getting out of bed. The noise died away instantly. Puzzled, he wondered how they had heard him over their own noise when he was that far away inside his cabin with all the doors and windows closed. Then he realized that it was Saturday night between sessions and that there was no one in that campsite. My parents live in a nice center chimney cape just outside Kennebunkport, Maine. The house was built around 1760 and moved to its current located in the 80s. It has sporadic paranormal activity, most of which I never experienced as they purchased the house after I'd moved to another state for college. One bitterly cold January I was staying with my parents on my winter break from school. I think it was my sophomore year. An 18th century house is always a drafty mess, and with the wind whipping over the field and slamming into the side of the house, it was damn near frigid inside. We were earning our stripes that year. My little sister, who is 7 years my junior, and I were sharing a big bed in one of the downstairs front rooms. Sharing beds makes a big difference when it's wicked cold. I wake up at about 8 a.m. to an almost empty house. My parents were away and my younger brother was asleep in another room far across the house in the L, so it was just my sister and I in the main house. As I'm lying there trying to build up the will to leave the warm bed, I start hearing a strange noise. It sounds distinctly like someone having a great deal of difficulty breathing, long raking phlegm-y breaths. I think to myself, shit, my little sister must have one hell of a cold. After about 20 seconds of this, I roll over to check on her as she really sounds like she's going to die. Except she's silent as a church mouse, wide awake, facing me. As soon as I see her face I realize she's not making the sound, and she can hear it too. She whispers, "That's not you." The sound is continuing even as we have a panicked whispered exchange. It's clearly coming from the bed, and it's not quiet or subtle. In utter disbelief we jump out of bed, the struggled breathing still carrying on. We check under the bed, all over the room, nothing. Finally it stops. We never heard it again, nor has anyone else in the family. An interesting aside, we researched the history of the house a little later and it turns out the owners in the first quarter of the 19th century, Charles and Sally Eaton, had a bit of a rough time of it in the house. Between 1820 and 1830 Sally, and 6 of the 9 children died of consumption, tuberculosis, in the house. I believe we may have been hearing one of those unfortunate souls' death rattle. Back in high school my boyfriend, his friends and I decided to explore some well-known haunted places in our area. We'd never done it before, but it was 12 a.m. on a Tuesday and we were bored. We looked up places online to find the places with the most interesting backstories and lore, and stumbled across stories about this one road called Paradise Road. There was an extensive message board explaining how people had seen dark figures or headless raccoons, cars would randomly stop working while driving through the road and so on. We venture out to this road, which took us a total of about 3 hours due to it being in the middle of nowhere and during a time where smartphones didn't exist, but once we turned on the road we were all pretty excited. We decided to drive through the road once, just to get a feel of it. It was a pretty short road, and driving as slow and 5 miles per hour took us about 2 to 3 minutes to drive through. It was surrounded by these really tall woods, so when looking out the window all you could see was trees. When we turned around to drive back the other direction, that's when all of a sudden dozens of little gold lights appeared in between the trees. They looked like they were floating Christmas lights, and they would hover slightly. Keep in mind it was 3:30 a.m. on a cold November rainy day, and we were all sober. I freaked out when I saw the lights and looked away, and when I looked back they were all gone. I asked my friends, "Did you guys see that?" And they responded with yes. I'm not sure what it was, but it was pretty surreal and dreamlike. The weirdest thing was we weren't even expecting that. There was no description of lights or orbs appearing on the road from what we read. I personally did not leave the car to explore because I was too scared, but my friends did and said they could hear faint screaming and whispering to get out of the woods. The other night I was awakened by the sound and feel of something heavy settling onto the bed between my legs, largish. I'd give a guess of 50 pounds based on the fact it felt very similar to a 50-pound dog curling up between my legs like before I had to leave my dogs with my parents. I was too afraid to look and see what had settled between my legs. We have no animals in the house, and ended up falling back asleep because whatever it was didn't feel threatening. The next night I was awakened in a similar manner, but this time I could hear little bitty paws sinking into the comforter and feel each step it took closer to my face. Again I was too afraid to look, but it didn't feel threatening and I fell back asleep. The third night I dreamed. This time it was definitely a dream that I felt something on the bed again, and this time I decided to look and see what it was. It was an old medium-sized Labrador. Yellow. I quickly woke my boyfriend and asked him WTF a dog was doing in our bedroom. We don't have any dogs. He replied he had no idea but was planning on throwing it outside because we had no dogs. At that point the dog somehow told me he just wanted a place to stay out of the cold. I got out of bed and started petting and cooing at him and convinced my boyfriend to keep him inside, and at that point I woke up. I woke up with a huge sense of peace and haven't felt anything walking on the bed since.